Welcome into GeForce TV. My name is Cam K. I'm here with you, your wingman, for the next hour here on GeForce for the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour. We actually have some good stuff to talk about this week. There's been some information that's been passed along to us. Let me make sure we try and get the camera situated properly here. The schedule is officially out, and what exciting news that we have to talk about where we're going for the 2023 NASCAR Pinty Series season. It didn't look a little different from 2022, but I'm glad that you're here on GeForce TV to chat with me tonight. Wes in the chat. Appreciate you, buddy. We're going to start our episode off with a hero card, our classic hero card for today. Takes us back, and it takes us back to a car that actually now has a bit of a importance once again in the series. It's a Napa car, Napa Pontiac, for a very successful NASCAR Pinty Series driver, now driver coach, Robin Buck. And we'll take it back. Here is your classic hero card of the week. And the beautiful Napa UAP Pontiac that ran with our good buddy Robin Buck. Robin actually ran in the series until a couple of years ago. He's driven so many different types of cars. He's driven obviously the 15 Napa, the 66 Napa. He's driven the 43, the 1. Actually, his last win came at Circuit ICAR in the 66 Quaker State car, and so he's definitely had lots of experience in the NASCAR Pinty Series. And we're going to be here to chat, of course, about the schedule for this year. Not a ton of real change that took place. We weren't really expecting that there was going to be much change this year. It's not really a given that you're going to get change every year, but this year, obviously, not a really big deal. We didn't really expect to see a lot of change within the series. There's obviously going to be some conversations that we're going to have here, because I'm a little bit interested with people, because there are obviously some changes to the schedule this year with an additional race being added, the most races that we've ever seen in the series before, with 14. But there was some omissions. There was some rumored events that did not end up being on the schedule. It was something that I think we were hoping for originally. There was some belief that we were going to see Riverside and Granby. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about those two events, because one thing that we have to remember here is that they're not given. Races are not just given away. There's a lot of criteria that has to be thought of when it comes to taking some race events and making them happen. We've seen not a ton, and this is the thing I think that people really might not remember, is that we really haven't seen a huge increase in terms of what the changes to the schedules are year to year. It normally is 1 or 2 events, not really a bunch of switching back and forth. But this year, again, adding in a second Ohsweken race, no Granby and no Riverside, doesn't mean that those races are off the table. While the schedule's been announced for this year, you can bet it's not off completely for the future. Tony Spiteri, when he was on this very show a couple of months ago, did state that the idea is to get the 2024 schedule out this summer. And that will be a big importance for 2024. There's a couple of news stories that we're going to look at here, thanks to some sources in Quebec, the Quebec Journal's Louis Butcher. We'll take a look here. The NASCAR Cup Series in 2024, question mark. Rumors have intensified in the recent weeks. Now, people are questioning whether or not there is legitimacy here. I can say that this is something that has been talked about. They're talking about NASCAR Cup leaders working at an unprecedented schedule for 2024, which would see new stops, including Montreal. Obviously, some of these details I have not been privy to, including the announcement here that he is mentioning 36 to 40 races. I don't think that that's possible. I don't think we're going to see that. However, there is definitely talk about a race next August at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Now, this has not been something that is unbelievable. It is very possible, in fact. This is something that we know that the NASCAR Pinty Series would definitely be a part of, considering the series went to Montreal for several years, of course, with the NASCAR Xfinity Series in their runs from 2007 to 2012. The crowds were phenomenal. The fans were phenomenal, and this would be a great opportunity once again to get some big name racers from Quebec and just Canada in general into a Cup Series event. While the races might not provide enough opportunities for drivers to be in them, it would give a great opportunity for the NASCAR Pinty Series to be a companion event with the NASCAR Cup Series, something that we haven't done before. Being a companion event to the Truck Series is one thing, but to have an opportunity to be alongside Cup stars like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, and others would give this attention to the series that it desperately needs. Now, can we believe that everything in this article is correct? No, we can't. Articles are just that. They're not always fact. In fact, I don't know how close Louis Butcher is to the actual garage. He probably has some really good contacts. I can say that myself, that I have great contacts within the series as well, but I honestly don't know 100% what is fact and what is fiction. People that I've been told that are involved in the schedule making process have stated that there are more than just tracks at Montreal being looked at. There's other possibilities that they could look at for next year. I don't think every track on the schedule is safe here. And whether or not they look at potentially adding more races, I think that's actually the plan. This is what my belief is. I actually believe that the second race at Ohsweken was originally supposed to go to Granby, but because there was some sort of a dispute, we're going to get to Granby's discussion in a minute. I believe that because it didn't happen, they granted and gifted Ohsweken that second date this year. I think there was initially supposed to be 15 races, and I think Riverside was originally going to be part of those plans, making a full rounded championship. Now, you guys know my opinion on Circuit Icar. I could get rid of that track tomorrow and I'd be happy. There's not a ton of replacements for that track, however. Tracks out in Quebec right now, you have our Montmagny, Mont-Tremblant, which I don't know is completely possible because of noise restrictions. Montmagny, I'm not sure what the reasoning would be why they aren't going there now. I've heard Senair, but I've also heard Senair is not in the best condition. In Ontario, you really don't have a lot of options anymore. You basically have Sauble Speedway, you have Peterborough Speedway, you have maybe a second race at Delaware Speedway. You don't have really a ton of options out there. Flamborough, I don't believe, would be considered once again. So at the end of the day, we have to look at what's possible here. Toronto obviously is still going to be a place that they would decide to go because it's the big market here in Ontario. But Delaware, that's not going anywhere. CT&P, those aren't going anywhere. The real question mark is when it comes to, say, Sunset Speedway, the Western events, and then out at Atlantic Canada. Now, the success of the Eastbound Park race last year makes me think that that's the ultimate goal, is to have two races in Atlantic Canada, one on the way there or one on the way back, whether it's Eastbound is first and then we go to Riverside on the way back, or they do vice versa. I think at the end of the day, two races out in Atlantic Canada is more interesting to businesses. It's more interesting on possible partnerships for the race events that would hopefully bring in additional cars and additional revenue. One of the things that is very difficult in our country of Canada is to find the right funding for race events across the year. You cannot have 6 events sponsored by Pinty's or by Quick. You need to have bigger name partners coming aboard week in and week out. And if you're going to have 15 races, you really need to start that search now. If there's going to be tracks that are dropped off the schedule, I don't have any inkling right now. I think Sunset has put themselves in a very safe position going forward, becoming a NASCAR home track once again. And then, of course, you have Granby, which is also a NASCAR home track. That looks very attractive to NASCAR. That is what they want to see. But there's other places that we really don't have a tested market. I don't believe BC is an option anymore. I think it's too far. I know we go all the way out to Alberta, but I don't think you'd be able to do more than the 3 races we currently do. Not to mention, you're also interfering on RS1's turf. RS1, BC is their home game. Trevor Siebert and that whole organization, they know what they need. And they don't need NASCAR coming in. They're trying to expand and continue to build. Could those cars potentially provide opportunities for NASCAR Pinty Series stars to race out in BC? We've already seen it. JP Bergeron has run out there, so has JR Fitzpatrick and Andrew Ranger, Gary Clute, Jason White. There's a lot of opportunities across Canada, but one of the things that we have to continue to look forward to is the way that the series will expand. A race with the Cup Series is exactly what they need. They need something of that ilk. If they can get somebody like a Rick Hendrick, Brad Keselowski, a Richard Childress to all of a sudden invest in having a car in the Pinty's race as well, then that bodes very well for 2024. I have, of course, some comments here I want to get to from Jim Haynes. I really see Ohsweken with the border open and maybe in 2 nights being even bigger than last year. I agree with you, Jim. And Granby may be added to the spring next year. I don't think it'll be spring. I think it'll probably be the same week as Ohsweken. That was the idea that was being floated out, was that we kind of do it all at the same time so that you're building cars and you're getting the cars ready for that one span of dirt races, not kind of doing it mixed in between. Added to the spring as they have great attendance at that track weekly. Granby is a great track. Dominic Lassay is definitely putting in a lot of effort, and they're really bummed. There's a lot of people that are actually really upset that Granby's not on there because, again, we've talked about press before. The press had already announced that it was happening. And that's the biggest, we're going to get to that conversation in a second, but that's the biggest issue that I have with a lot of these, is that there is a lot of problems with having a announcement made without it coming from NASCAR. That's one of the biggest problems that we have, is people announcing stuff that didn't actually happen. Riverside, again, that was all rumor. Nothing came from NASCAR directly. It was all word of mouth. Jim Haynes says, as much money that the island is paying, I would always put that event first. You can't have a problem and lose any cars at the Rock. Absolutely. That's a great point. Whether or not the Rock would come first or second, I think you're absolutely correct. You can't have cars being lost, especially after what we saw at Eastbound last year. LP Dumoulin and of course Brett Taylor got their cars destroyed really early in those events, and if they had to run another race, I don't know what they would have done. The other thing that was questionable was, when would that other race be? Would you do something like a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, or would you leave it for a week later? I don't know. I think the reality is that there's logistical challenges, cost challenges. As Caitlin Patrick and Todd Lewis talked about on Racing It Out on their podcast, they basically they said exactly what was the issue, in that guys and gals might need to have brought a backup car to the racetrack, and that's not something that they can all do. The reality is that there are some teams that don't have enough haulers. There are some teams that don't have any haulers to be able to do that. They can take their one car, and that's about it. Dirt Dog Media, nice to see you. So I don't know. I don't know what the end goal is going to be there, but when we go to 2024, you're going to have to consider, and they're going to have to consider, what the actual issues could be. And based off of what Todd and Caitlin said, they're very well aware. And maybe it was just that they couldn't come to a decision. I've heard that potentially there was another racing series that was going to be there at the time slot that NASCAR wanted, and they didn't want to do a combination event. That could also be an issue, because if there was no other freedom in the schedule, that would be the reason as to why they couldn't show up. So The other thing you have to remember is that Eastbound Park, of course, was a big event for its first ever outing. This would be the second event outing, then would be the third next year. That's the final year of their contract year. I think you put a two race effort with Eastbound Park and then Riverside together. That's an easy way to resell for the following year, and hopefully re-up your contract once again. I've been told that Riverside is not, this conversation's not dead. It is still very much alive. Granby, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that is going to happen next year. I think the only reason it didn't happen this year is we'll read in this next article is that there was not there was some safety concerns that NASCAR had that needed to be addressed, and that's something we're going to have to continue to look at, because I know Eastbound Park was in the same boat. They did have some safety concerns last year. Jim says Tuesday night would be tough after an event like this year, a race on Sunday from rain and then a 24-hour boat ride, not leave much time. That's the issue, though, right, Jim? Is that there's not a lot of time to plan. I also think, though, if you give them a week out there, that's asking a lot, and I don't know whether their budgets are really enough. YTW says, I want to weigh in for a minute, but the best way for NASCAR International to grow the series is to run the Pinty Series alongside the Cup or Xfinity Series at either CTMP or Montreal. That's 1,000% correct. That is the goal. Now, the problem you have to remember is that NASCAR International, that focuses on only the exterior series. They don't have anything to do with the Cup Series or Xfinity. They would have to work in partnership with those two. And I think they will. I think the reality is you're going to see something along those lines in the future. Montreal has been talked about way too much in the last couple of years. I've heard two different places. I've heard Montreal and I've heard GP3R as the possible places for a Cup Series or an Xfinity Series coming into Canada. I have not heard any sort of interest of the Truck Series coming back. That appears to be dead in the water. CTMP, unfortunately, would be part of that, in that there doesn't appear to be any sort of interest in CTMP as a place to go. Granby being NASCAR Weekly with JP Paillet being a local behind the event, I'm with you on it will happen. I think people are sleeping on JP Paillet on how many connections he has within Quebec. Jim, he has a lot when we're talking of resources, lots of people that he can bring in. Not only that, is JP is doing an amazing job. And I think it's actually JC Paillet, not JP, but JC is he's really working with Chevrolet. He's trying to get Chevrolet in. I mean, he's the biggest, I think the most successful, at least what their marketing campaign is, the most successful Chevrolet dealer in Canada. So absolutely they'd want to go back there. And as Terry says, is the walls have to grow taller. That's exactly what it is. I mean, Oshweekend had to go through a lot of changes as well to be able to get a race. And I completely understand being upset and being disappointed, but NASCAR can't go off of somebody's word. And that's going to bring us to this next article here. And I'm going to go in and talk about how stuff like this and the way that stuff is written is very important. Okay. And this is the way that this was written. A record 14 races in NASCAR Pinties in 2023, but only 3 in Quebec. The NASCAR Pinty Series is not a plan to stop over at Granby. Okay, first off, there is some problems that I have with the way that articles have been laid out. Okay, I understand that there's frustration, but there seems to be this constant pull back and forth that it's Ontario versus Quebec here. And I need to set something straight here, and that is, this is not a Quebec series. This is the Canadian series. While, yes, a lot of the money is coming from Quebec, I'm seeing arguments that oh, well, most of the field is from Quebec, so you need to race more in Quebec. Okay, no racing series does that. Unless it is a provincial series. This is not a provincial championship. This is a national championship. So first off, that argument dies right there. The other thing is that if you were to take a look at the Cup Series, okay, split it up between the states, okay, sure, they have a lot of people from North Carolina. But if they said, oh, 75% of the field is from North Carolina, so you need to run 75% of the races in North Carolina, then what? The rest of the country gets nothing? That's not how racing works. It's not showcasing the racing across Canada. I understand that you're going to want to have a lot of home races because you've got home drivers. But at the end of the day, there's not also a ton of options out there. You've got to showcase Western to Eastern to Atlantic Canada, and making one stop in a province a year is what some provinces get. There's a lot of provinces that don't, where Ontario gets the most, and a lot of frustration around that, but you have to remember where the series has come from. It is still roots from NASCAR, which is an Ontario-based series with mostly Ontario-based teams. That has not changed. The majority of the race teams, where their cars are from, where the crew members are from, where the cars are worked on, is from Ontario. That has not changed. So to go out and say that this needs to be one province only because we have the most drivers is absolutely wrong. It's absolutely wrong. It's the same way you think about like Formula One. If you took Formula One and said, oh, 80% of the drivers are from Great Britain, so we're only going to race in Great Britain. No, that's not how any sport works. That's not how racing works. I understand the frustrations around it, but phrasing stuff like this gets people into a tussle because it makes it seem as if there's a vendetta against Quebec, which there is not. We wouldn't have people from Quebec working to put stuff on the schedule if there was a vendetta. Absolutely not. Jim says, sorry, I even bought shirts and hats from them. JC and I think he says largest GM. Is it largest? Okay, maybe that's what it was. Terry says we need to expand to provinces that have no show to be across Canada. True. Absolutely true, Terry. BC is the hardest one, I think, to go to. PEI, I don't think there even is a racetrack on PEI, so I don't think that's possible. I don't think we're going to see anything Northwest Territories or the Yukon just for logistical reasons. And then at the end of the day, we have races in Saskatoon. We have races in Edmonton, but we're still missing a province there. The other thing, too, is, as Terry says, tracks are required to be NASCAR sanctioned as well, and that is about track ownership wanting to pay those fees. Some tracks are not in the position to pay those fees. Okay? So it has a lot to do with it. By saying that it's these guys, it's the Ontario guys not wanting to go to our tracks. No. Racers race, and they'll go where they go. But they're also not stupid. They know what value they have to pay. If it's going to cost too much money to go out to a certain track, then unfortunately that track is not worth it to them, especially if the payouts are not what they need to be. And in most cases, they're not. You race because you want to race, not to make money. That's the reality of the situation. Heading out to Eastbound Park is a really, really tough amount of money. Same with Western Canada. That's a lot to ask of these race teams. And Ken Class brings up Ken Clays. I hope I pronounced that correct, Ken. Nothing's going to happen without big corporate sponsors. He's 100% correct. If you want a national championship, there needs to be corporate money there. And while we're getting it from the Pinty side, what we need is those bigger corporations to do the race events, payouts for race events. That is essentially what you need. Because at the end of the day, there needs to be money that is going into the owner's hands to be able to afford to do the full schedule. That's the reality. It is too expensive. I know Tony is working hard on helping bring those costs down, but they need to go down exceptionally quick, because the rate that they are right now is not okay. So Joel Robinson, the guy who would know, says you don't have to have NASCAR sanctioning to hold a Pinty's race. I didn't think so, because Delaware doesn't have NASCAR sanctioning. So I'm not sure where their confusion is there. But Joel would know about that. Joel also knows, because he goes to do all these races, that some of them just don't have the capabilities of hosting a race. It's just, that's the reality. And I'm sure Joel would tell you all about it. He's done races for years. No offense, Joel. I'm not trying to age you or anything like that. But he knows. He knows what racetracks can do, and it is not a quick and simple process. Ohsweken not sanctioned either. So there's some miscommunication there. But again, I agree with the corporate sponsorship. And Clinton and Joel really kind of know what they're talking about. Not saying that you don't, Terry, but I'm just saying that they would know. And that's not the first time that I've heard that argument either. Joel's saying right now, Sunset is now NASCAR sanctioned. It's back to being a NASCAR home track again. CTMP, Toronto, Saskatoon, Ohsweken, Delaware, all not NASCAR sanctioned. So that argument is by the wayside. It isn't the first time I have heard that, though, that you have to be NASCAR sanctioned. That's what I was told was the reasoning for why Riverside didn't get their race, but that's clearly not the case. And I mean, the amount of effort that's going into things this offseason is very evident. It's just not upfront for people to see. Based off of Todd and Caitlin's communication, I absolutely, if you guys haven't watched already, go to check out their podcast, Racing It Out. They had a very good conversation on the amount of effort it takes to put on races. So unfortunately, again, a lot of people expect it's just going to be like, pay your money and you're on the schedule. It's not like that. It's not. Yeah, okay, so sanctioned track just means that you have to go through NASCAR's award system, re points. I think what we're looking for is maybe NASCAR approved is what it has to be. It would help if the provincial government helped fund, as they do other sports, if it helps to be sanctioned. Yes, it definitely helps, and it needs to be a NASCAR approved track, meaning that the safety is approved. And based off, again, this article that was written here, it says will unveil, we mentioned this. Now, again, it says the Autodrome Granby, which had been toying with the project for a number of years, hosting the track, is unfortunately absent from the schedule. On the other hand, the track of Ohsweken will present a double header. As a reminder, Granby is also a dirt track. Dominic Lassay says, I admit that no agreement has been signed with NASCAR Pennies and that Granby is not on the schedule that will be broadcast in the coming days. I put a lot of effort convincing the authorities to come in, but in vain. We have met all of NASCAR's requests, including safety, which is not exactly what I've heard. There seems to be miscommunication here, because there's been people saying that they didn't meet the requirements, and they're saying that they did. I believe, and it was another article potentially by Michel Tessier, which said that they had to make some changes and they promised that they would. Well, okay, so a business, if I'm not mistaken, Clinton can probably confirm this. Ohsweken had to do a lot of changes with their walls. They had to make changes so that NASCAR would approve them for the Pinty Series race. I mean, Glenn obviously did those changes. You can't go off of somebody's word. That's not how a sanctioning body would do things. And again, it says here, it's funny. It says, yeah, so there we go. So Joel Robinson is clearing things up for us here. Again, you're saving $0 when you come from eastbound to Riverside. All crew members would come home, and you'd have to pay a driver to stay with the trailer. Midweek races just don't work in that region. People travel up to 6 hours for a Saturday show. Yeah, that right there is definitely a problem. Terry says, I believe they added banking. It made walls too short. Now that would do it too. Jim says, we only race at one track in our series that the city is actually behind, and that is Langley Speed. I love Langley Speedway, Jim. That's one of my favorite tracks in Virginia. All other tracks, the government actually do not like the racetracks. That's really hard, and I don't know. Joel would probably know better than I about when NASCAR raced. They did have government support, I believe, because Ontario was on the. It was Ontario, or if it was the government of Canada, was actually on the NASCAR race cars. So I'm not sure what in what degree that was, but there was definitely something, whether it was tourism or some sort of a package. But again, it's about the way that things are written here too, saying again that you've got to make sure that you're pleasing the crowds. That's absolutely true, but there's no vendetta here. It was Canada money, really, Joel. That's amazing. So there are tourism grants out there. It's just whether or not they would be given, right? Castro got it for the series, and that's maybe what it takes. I don't know if they're in the position to do that anymore. And I guess Joel and Clinton would know about it being easier maybe back in the day to do it. I don't know if it's just too much money now. It's a hard thing, and I think everybody goes out and just assumes that people can just get sponsors and they can just get this and get that. I can tell you, I'm doing work right now for the Ontario Sportsman Series, and their budget is like a 16th of the budget of the Pinty Series, and even that we can't get partners. It's about return of investment, and I think for a lot of people, they're wondering what value you get. You can't just go and expect to have somebody give you a bunch of money because you shook their hand. You've got to provide something, right? Car costs are 5 times the money. That is nuts. Nuts when you hear that. And this is a guy, again, like Joel Robinson, been part of putting on the broadcasts for so many years. The owner at Langley actually races with some of us, and he owns another car in the series. He just put in new LED lighting in his like daylight. Is what is it called? Larry King Law's Langley Speedway. Is that the one that you're referring to? I used to watch their races weekly on Fans Choice TV. Similar to what we have here on GeForce TV, of course, you can watch racing all throughout the summertime. Of course, we got the APC series. It's going to be running once again here live this summer. I'm so excited. Can't wait. Love GeForce TV. So they said that there's still hope for Granby. I would expect that there's probably going to be. Riverside, like I said, it's based off of what Joel is saying here, it is probably not a simple thing if they want to have a go at it. Ohsweken, again, I expect that that's going to stay. I mean, Ohsweken is on the schedule for years to come. NASCAR was national, but it was supported by multiple local regional NASCAR divisions. So every time you came to see 5 to 10 guys race would be local, which attracts 40% of the audience when you have a local short track ace. Yeah. I mean, we saw it, Joel, at Delaware Speedway when Ray Morneau Jr. was in the race. I think he had the biggest fan support of any of the races that had been there. There is a track in PEI, he does say. Curious which track that is, Joel. Because, I mean, Joel's been to, like, every track in the world, it seems like. So he probably know which one it is. Actually, Joel was out there at GP3R this past weekend with Nitro Rallycross. And our champion, Marc-Antoine Cameron, got out there and was racing around that. I'd also be curious if Joel could divulge in whether he thinks that a Pinty Series race on ice or snow is possible. Tried a NASCAR street course in Winnipeg. It was 45 and was not a great avoidant. Oysterbed Speedway. What a wicked name. Riegser in the chat, of course. I always want to make sure you mention to check out Riegser's channel. Covers the NASCAR Pinty Series all season long. gives some great insight, does some great videos, and is a future star in our little division. We hope to see him at the races this year. Hopefully, we'll get him out at Joel Robinson. There's somebody right there. If you want to get somebody for Eastbound Park, it would be our buddy right there. Pinty's on ice. Boo! No, Joel, come on. You don't want to see that? I mean, we would be the first ones to do it because the Euro Series isn't going to do it anymore. So, it's always interesting when you hear what people like and dislike. But at the same time, Pinty's on ice broadcast on TMZ. Oh God, there you go. That would be a great way to get us some attention. Absolutely. Maybe what we need is to get Frankie Muniz to come and race. We need our Malcolm in the Middle to come race in the series. No, I think this year is going to be really good. I'm very interested to see where we have some roster changes. There's definitely some rumblings and some news at some of the racetracks. Definitely stuff happening at WMI. And, man, it is going to be an interesting year for sure because, I mean, you've got guys, hopefully, and gals that'll be coming back. And Riegser says the ideas are endless if you can get out there. Listen, man, I tell you, Joel Robinson is the guy to go with. Opportunities galore. Also a great guy out there, Reedinson Media. Ryan Reed, he put an amazing promo video on from last year at Eastbound Park, and we were looking at possibly doing that this year, but it's a little bit difficult to get out there. It would, YTW, man. Pinty Series on ice would definitely suit the True North Racing. Again, though, I'm curious how much of that race, how it worked. And Joel can probably, if he's able to, how the actual racing conditions were, if it would have been something that's even close to possible. Because remember, Rallycross is completely different from what we'd see. San Air, I don't think is raceable. Yeah, Joel's mentioned that to me before. That, and I believe somebody else had mentioned something about it being more of a used up facility. Mont Tremblant, again, I've heard his noise restrictions. Montmagny is the question mark, I think, Joel, for us right now as to if that is a viable track. I think I had spoken with somebody at the track, and he had said that he's been trying for a while. Noise issues, yeah, that would be a big issue. No facility for the fans, that's another issue. That's the thing, too, you have to remember, is it's not just that. You have other tracks. Joel can probably talk about the other guys like Peterborough and Sauble and Flamborough in terms of like facilities and the track itself. I think obviously with the modified going over the wall last year at Flamborough, NASCAR would not be heading back there anytime soon. Definitely unless they put up some bigger walls and stronger walls, I assume, and some better fencing. Yeah, that probably wouldn't happen again. But yeah, there's definitely stuff that we can look forward to. You need to keep the tracks short so they can keep it cheap within reason. See, Joel Robinson says Montmagny is a very good track, not the same track we raced with Cascar. See, I went to their website and I've seen a layout of the track. I think it's a beautiful track. I think it looks very good for this type of series. So I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind it, but I know that there's definitely people that are trying. If I'm being honest, I would prefer it over Granby just because I don't really want to see more than one dirt race. Not cracking on the dirt people, but if it came in and Montmagny replaced iCar, I'd be very happy. Not my favorite place on there, and but that's really, we don't have a lot more options, and that's the other thing we have to remember is tracks are not popping up all over the place. In fact, they're losing stuff. Yes, Howard is the guy that I've been talking to, and I haven't told him how much I don't like iCar, but he knows how much I love Saint Eustache, and Saint Eustache is still one of my top 5 favorite tracks. I don't even know why, really. It just is one of my tracks that I really, really liked. So, but again, I think this year we've got a solid schedule, just like we did last year. I mean, Caitlin and Todd did point out, and we're very correct in that it really was a great year last year in terms of the races were fantastic. I think the best thing was seeing that finish at Saskatoon between DJ and Andrew Ranger. Very clean race to the finish, was one of my favorite races. Same with Delaware. And that's kind of what we get every year, is we get a couple races that were just awesome. It's true, Jim, though. It's the price of, but for up here, I mean, a lot of it is real estate. It's cost. Here's an idea: would be a good track. It would be Jukasa, but reconfigured to a road course. They did so much work to make that an oval the size that it is. I don't think that there's any interest. People just want to see Jukasa open again. YTW. I mean, I've been talking with people that are the general manager and family down there, and they said that there is still some minor interest, but it needs this, right? And I don't know, honestly. Like Joel saying that the car costs were five times what they were in NASCAR. That doesn't bode well, because you don't have millions of dollars coming in on a regular basis. Now we can continue to try and build as much as possible, and that's what we're going to do with having this show, with having weekly coverage of the Pinty series on channels like Riegser's, on having those broadcasts live by Joel and his team. You need that. It needs to be readily available. I know Tony is definitely working on timing and scoring for this year. That has to be number one. Area 27, Ken, I did inquire about that and was told that likelihood would probably be not very high because of RS1 being developed and or that being kind of their home ground. Whether or not that could actually happen in the future, maybe Joel would know a little bit more. I don't know. I don't know about BC. I think we went out there for Sun Valley for years. Really haven't been back there since, and I don't know. I know people seem to like it, so I watched the episode, and what piqued me to see was being underwhelmed at the 2023 schedule was unnecessary because the 2022 schedule was quite different and new. Yeah, I mean it's not. Yeah, it's true. It's exactly the kind of the same, right? It's people find anything to complain about Riegser, though. That's the thing, right? It's hard to always find positives. That's what my goal is, to try and be. Try to be as positive about the series as possible. It's not a ton of things that I think that we do that they've done wrong with the schedule. I personally think that Montemagny instead of ICAR would be a much bigger improvement. I just don't think the racing at ICAR is all that great. I've also heard from people at the track when I asked them about this on the page, and they just said that the facilities weren't really that great. It's not really anything to do. So I feel like maybe Montemagny would have some more options, considering they do have weekly racing there. I don't believe ICAR has. I mean, it's an airport circuit. That's the one thing you have to remember too, right? So I've seen some of the people floating out possibly running the oval there. I was, again, people giving their opinions that would be an awful race because it's just a paperclip. But I was like, well, Martinsville is a paperclip. The only difference is there'd be no banking. So we'd have to see. I mean, honestly, don't know what the solution will be and what the plan is. If we're going to go to 15 races next year, then I could see doing 2 out there. If it's one more extra race in Quebec, I'm sure that will appease the fans. But there are some fans that I know for sure would prefer there being 9 races in Quebec or 90% of the schedule, and that's just not going to happen. There's also going to be a very big interest as to what's going to happen in terms of our roster for this year. because there's not a lot of confirmations yet. We know of a couple of names for sure: LP Dumoulin, DJ Kennington, Andrew Ranger, Marc-Antoine Camerand. All likely, Chantal Kalika has confirmed that she'll be back for the Western races. Don't know about JP Bergeron. I'd say he's probably pretty likely. You have... we don't even know if Trayton Lapsovich will be able to run the full season this year. And that's not something I thought we would have to worry about. Daniel Blois, we know, is going to be racing for the Ontario races this year. Big jump for MBS Motorsports in the offseason to run ovals and road courses in Ontario this year. I think you're going to see probably Sam Fellows back in some capacity. Larry Jackson's typically always in for some races. Whether he's full-time, hard to say. I know he's probably working on some funding as well. Kevin Lacroix has already confirmed that he's back for the full season with the Napa once again. I don't think we're going to see Brian Cathcart for the full season again this year. We already know Alex Gannett, he signed in for 2 years in the 3-car with EHR, but that the rest of EHR, I have no idea about. Wallace, Dexter Stacy, no idea about Ray Jr. and Rafael Lessard. I've heard that potentially both of them are not back. No idea what's happening with Renamato and Mark Dilley. We know that White Motorsports is running the 0 of Glenn Stiers and the 27, but they aren't running anybody else. So it's going to be 2 full-time cars, Stiers and Ranger from WMI. Where does that leave everybody else? So there's a lot of turnover, a lot of change. Gary Clute, I've not heard anything about what Gary's plans are this year. I would expect we see somebody like Matthew Kingsbury potentially come back in a bigger capacity. JF Dumoulin likely back in for his race at GP3R. Alex Labay, that's somebody who I really think could be coming back. He didn't get a full schedule last year in Xfinity, and at this rate, I don't think he's going to. They have not made any sort of announcement that he's coming back in any sort of capacity. Yet they have mentioned Josh Williams back at DGM, and they have mentioned some newer, I think it was Josh Bilicki potentially in the 91. So where does that leave Labay, right? So if I'm hoping, I would definitely see this. Also, isn't it kind of early to be concerned about lackluster news or no? No, Riggs, because we want to make sure that, I mean, for myself, it's a little bit different, right? There's a difference between lackluster news internally and announced news, right? So I'm not getting a ton of news at all. So it is typically quiet, picks up around Motorama, but Motorama is in the beginning, the second week of March, and we're almost in February. So, yeah, sure, you can say it's a little bit early, but am I concerned? Not really. I just don't want people to expect that the field is going to grow compared to last year. I don't expect that it's going to be what it was. I think we're going to probably see a decrease in full-time and probably a decrease in our regular, our median for this year. I don't think we're going to have 23 as the median amount of cars that we get each week. I think that'll probably decrease a little bit. But again, build 2022 is what we did. We build 2023, make 2024 even bigger, especially, again, if you get those announcements. If they get the schedule out early for 2024, which it sounds like they will, I feel like 2024 is when you're going to see those changes, if there's going to be changes. And 2024 as well could be a big year. We also are forgetting that NASCAR International has plans for a new chassis. They had mentioned that. And it was supposed to be a chassis for that was interchangeable. So Jim Haynes says car count is always concerned for 95% of tracks or series. Only a few are always full. It's a worldwide issue, Jim, because it's the cost of racing. And we know that racing is on its last little legs if we're not careful, because the way that the world is working is all about electric electric, right? Well, what's one of the things that's going to get attacked right away is going to be motor racing. In that they're going to start wanting to have electric vehicles. You cannot have that in Canada. It's the costs would be way too insane for that, and it's just not plausible. So my end goal is that they'll leave, racing alone, compared to, say, everyday vehicles. I think there's a definite bypass where, sure, if there's environmental issues with people's passenger vehicles sitting in traffic for hours and hours a day, that definitely makes sense. But for an auto race, that's 2 hours and an hour practice, 2 hour practice, and then maybe an hour qualifying 10 times throughout the year. Big difference, right? So I think there's definite things that we have to watch out for. And of course, the value of land in Canada is always a big thing too. We're losing out in terms of that, but that's why we need to continue to push with channels. Like I said, Riegser definitely going out there and talking about the series. We'll talk it continuously here on GeForce TV, and we'll continue to try and grow as we head into 2023. We'll be back next week. We'll continue our conversation about what we could potentially see. I assume we'll probably get into some other racing series across Ontario and Canada, but this has been Cam K, your wingman for the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour. Make sure if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the Stickers and Scuffs podcast. We are in the middle of our Ladies of the Oval month. We'll have Layla Walzer, a standout junior late model driver, on the show on Wednesday. And we'll continue to cover the NASCAR Pinty Series all season long at the track and at home. But I want to thank each and every one of you guys for showing up and having a chat with me tonight. We had a really good conversation. Lots of people involved. Definitely want to throw my thank yous out to Joel Riegser, definitely Jim Haynes, one of our loyal listeners, Wesley in the chat, Ken Clays, YTW Snips, always up in there. Appreciate it. Terry Dewey, Clinton Jeffrey, of course, the man, my boss man. Appreciate you guys all tuning in, having a chat with me. And we definitely will do this once again. We'll do it next week. Al Thomas, thank you, buddy. And we'll see you guys all next week